of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. You're watching Eagle News International. Here are tonight's news. First, the Department of Health on Monday reported 630 additional coronavirus disease cases, raising the overall tally to 30,682. Let's listen in.
Laboratory submissions ka. Makikita po sa inyong mga screen na mula sa laboratory submissions kahapon na na-validate as of 4 p.m. today, meron po tayong 467 fresh cases na nadagdag sa ating talaan, kung saan 164 ay galing sa Region 7, ang 149 ay galing sa NCR, ang 153 ay mula sa iba't ibang rehiyon ng ating bansa at merong isang repatriate. Para naman po sa mga late cases, nakapagtala tayo ng 163 cases na ang mga resulta ay lumabas mahigit 3 araw na ang nakalipas, ngunit ngayon lamang na-validate dahil ngayon lang naibigay ng mga laboratorio sa Epidemiology Bureau. Sa 163 late cases, 93 ay galing sa Region 7, 25 ay galing sa NCR, at 45 ay galing sa iba't ibang rehiyon ng ating bansa. Kaya po ang total confirmed cases natin as of 4 p.m. today, June 22, ay 30,682, kung saan ang nadagdag sa araw na ito ay 630 cases. Sa total confirmed po natin, meron pong 250 na naka-recover, kaya ang total recoveries po natin ay 8,143. Sa deaths naman, meron pong nadagdag ng 8 kaso, kaya sa kasalukuyan ay nasa 1,177 na po ang total deaths na ating naitala.
The DOH said 163 of the new cases are late or results belatedly reported and were only verified recently, while 467 are fresh cases or results released to the patient within the past 3 days. Of the fresh cases, 149 are from the National Capital Region, 164 from Region 7, 153 from other regions, and 1 repatriate. Meanwhile, 25 of the late cases are from NCR, 93 from Central Visayas, and the remaining as from other regions. The DOH also reported 250 new recoveries and 8 new deaths. To date, the total number of recoveries nationwide is 8,143, while the death toll is 1,177. Meanwhile, Malacanang said President Duterte will attend the different meetings with his fellow Southeast Asian nation leaders on Friday, June 26, for the 36th ASEAN Summit.
Siya po ay maghahanda ng kanyang talumpati sa taong bayan natin at may ilang mga miyembro po ng gabinete at ang IATF ang mapapasama rito. Pero itong linggo po ay 36 ASEAN Summit, no? So ito po ay talagang a big event for all the countries of ASEAN at magaganap po itong linggong ito. So busy po si Presidente sa ASEAN Summit itong linggong ito at meron pa po siyang schedule na bibigyan niyan pugay yung mga nagbuwis ng buhay sa laban sa mga terorista sa Mindanao po.
ASEAN leaders were supposed to hold their 36th annual summit in April this year, but the meeting was postponed due to the global threat posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. There was also a proposal from Vietnam, this year's chair of the 10-man regional bloc, to hold the 36th ASEAN summit in Hanoi, Vietnam on June 27 and 28. However, the final decision was to resort to a virtual summit on June 26 as the COVID-19 pandemic remains a threat in the region. ASEAN leaders have held several virtual meetings with their dialogue partners in an effort to plot a strategy to overcome the COVID-19 crisis that has gripped the region. In April, President Duterte said ASEAN members must work together to counter the adverse social and economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic in the regional bloc. Containing the spread of the COVID-19 is the current priority of the 10 ASEAN member states. The COVID-19 pandemic is still accelerating and its effects will be felt for decades. That is according to World Health Organization's Director General in an online conference on Monday. Take a look.
The pandemic is still accelerating. It took more than 3 months for the first 1 million cases to be reported. The last 1 million cases were reported in just 8 days. But we know the pandemic is so much more than a health crisis. It's an economic crisis, a social crisis, and in many countries, a political crisis. Its effects will be felt for decades to come.
The WHO warned last week of a new and dangerous phase of the coronavirus pandemic, with people tiring of lockdowns despite the disease's rapid spread. The COVID-19 illness, which has now killed more than 465,000 people and infected almost 9 million worldwide, is surging in the Americas and parts of Asia, even as Europe starts to ease restrictive measures. Lockdowns imposed to halt the spread of the virus have caused crippling economic damage, but the WHO says the pandemic still poses a major threat. A vaccine remains months off at best, despite several trials, while scientists are still discovering more about the virus, its symptoms, and the extent to which it may have spread before being identified. Brazil said it had registered more than 50,000 deaths from the coronavirus outbreak, as well as about 1 million infections, as the second worst affected country in the world struggles to control the disease. The Ministry of Health reported 641 new deaths in the last 24 hours, taking the toll to 50,617, with 1,085,038 recorded infections. Brazil is the second most affected country behind the United States, which accounts for nearly 120,000 deaths and more than 2.2 million cases. President Jair Bolsonaro, who has famously compared the virus to a little flu, has clashed with state and local authorities over their use of stay-at-home measures and business closures to contain it. The far-right leader argues the economic impact of such measures risks being worse than the virus itself. Latin America and the Caribbean surpassed 2 million cases, with Brazil home to more than half of the infections, according to an AFP tally based on official figures. The virus is accelerating its spread in the region, with Mexico the second hardest hit country there, followed by Peru and Chile. And the pandemic has killed at least 465,300 people worldwide since its surface in China late last year, according to an AFP tally. At 1900 GMT on Sunday, based on official sources, the U.S. has the most deaths at 119,846, followed by Brazil with 49,976, Britain with 42,632, Italy with 36,634, and France with 29,633. And Australians were warned on Monday to avoid traveling to Melbourne as the country's second biggest city tightened coronavirus restrictions amid fears of a second wave of the epidemic. Take a look.
Warning about avoiding those local government areas in metropolitan Melbourne where they're around the world each day. So the risk is there for the long term. We have done so well in Australia, and our strategy always envisaged that we'd get some outbreaks, and this outbreak in Victoria did concern us. There's no question about that. The rate of rise and the fact that it was community transmission late last week caused significant concern, and that's why HPPC, with the blessing of the Victorian authorities, put in that warning about avoiding those local government areas in metropolitan Melbourne where there are currently active cases.
Victoria State has recorded more than 110 cases in the past week, many of them in Melbourne, prompting leaders of other regions to warn against visiting the city's 6 designated virus hotspots. The Premier of neighboring New South Wales State, Gladys Berwick-Shigland, said anyone attending or intending to visit the city should reconsider your plans. Officials in Victoria have stalled plans to allow increased numbers of diners in restaurants and cafes, and also reimpose tighter rules on gatherings in homes in response to the outbreak. It was the first major backpedal on easing restrictions as the rest of the country continues to record low numbers of new cases and work to restart the economy. Although numbers remain relatively low in Melbourne, a spike in the rate of community transmission, those cases which authorities are unable to trace to the source, has fueled concerns it could get out of hand quickly. The state's chief health officer, Brett Sutton, has blamed the rise on lockdown fatigue and complacency, saying the situation had now reached a dangerous point as there was no plan B. Like the rest of the country, early restrictions on travel and gatherings successfully curbed the virus in Melbourne before last week. The new clusters have emerged at Melbourne's Stamford Plaza Hotel, which is being used to quarantine citizens returning from overseas, an H&M clothing store in the city's north, and within extended families in a couple of suburbs. The Indonesian government is investigating the alleged hacking of its site after reports say COVID tests have been leaked online. Although it has denied claims that details of the 230,000 people who took the COVID-19 tests have been leaked. Take a look. Communication and Information Minister Johnny Plate told Straits Times that, quote, the COVID-19 database and the results of the examinations at the ministry's data center are safe. The ministry has developed an application called Pedulilindungi, which seeks to trace and track those testing positive for COVID-19. Millions of people have downloaded the app from Google and Play Store and Apple's App Store since its launch in March. Now, the alleged hacker who posted the offer on database sharing and marketplace raid forums displayed a set of leaked data and asked for $300 for the entire set. The data displayed included names, addresses, phone numbers, ages, and nationalities, as well as medical records of people who underwent COVID-19 tests in a number of hospitals in Bali, Indonesia's tourism hotspot. The reports of the breach arose after an alleged hacker with the username Database Shopping offered to sell the personal data of people undergoing the testing in Indonesia. And Saudi Arabia ended a nationwide coronavirus curfew and lifted restrictions on businesses, including hair salons and cinemas, after 3 months of stringent curbs, despite a spike in infections. Prayers were also allowed to resume in mosques in the city of Mecca, according to state media, just weeks before the annual Hajj pilgrimage is due to start. International flights and religious pilgrimages, however, remain suspended, and social gatherings of more than 50 people are prohibited, according to the Interior Ministry. But Saudi Arabia's General Commission for Audiovisual Media announced the reopening of cinemas across the kingdom with strict guidelines on social distancing. The kingdom, which has the highest reported coronavirus infections in the Gulf, has seen a spike in cases after it began a phased easing of stringent lockdown measures in late May. On Sunday, the total number of infections rose to 157,612, while the death toll climbed to 1,267, according to data from the Health Ministry. But the decision to lift restrictions comes amid the kingdom's worst economic crisis in decades, as it grapples with the twin blow of low oil prices and the impact of the virus. North Korea has millions of propaganda leaflets ready to send to the south by an aerial armada of balloons, it said on Monday, heightening its rhetoric against Seoul after blowing up a liaison office. It is preparing to retaliate with its largest ever distribution of leaflets against the enemy, the official Korean Central News Agency reported on Monday. Altogether, 12 million leaflets of all kinds reflective of the wrath and hatred of the people from all walks of life have been produced, it said, and more than 3,000 balloons prepared to send them far to the south. In recent weeks, Pyongyang has issued a series of vitriolic condemnations of Seoul over anti-North leaflets, which defectors based in the south send across the border, usually attached to balloons or floated in bottles. The North said it will have nothing more to do with Seoul, and last week blew up a liaison office on its side of the border that symbolized inter-Korean rapprochement, while threatening to bolster its military presence in and near the demilitarized zone. Analysts say Pyongyang has been conducting a series of staged provocations aimed at forcing concessions from Seoul and Washington, with nuclear talks at a standstill. Ostensibly, the source of its anger is the leaflets, which it says insult the dignity of its leadership, a reference to leader Kim Jong-un. Both Koreas used to regularly send leaflets and loudspeaker broadcasts to the other side, but they agreed to stop such activities in the Panmunjom Declaration that Moon and Kim signed at their first summit in 2018. In other news, South Korea's presidential office on Monday accused former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton of distorting facts and jeopardizing future negotiations with his scathing account of President Donald Trump's North Korea summit strategy. John Bolton's forthcoming memoir, The Room Where It Happened, takes both Trump and South Korean President Moon Jae-in to task for their handling of a series of historic meetings with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un beginning in 2018. Chung Yu-yong, Moon's security advisor, who first told President Trump that Kim wanted to meet and appears repeatedly in the book, said it, quote, does not convey accurate facts, and a large chunk of it distorts facts a great deal. He did not cite specifics, but he said that disclosing details about the bilateral nuclear negotiations violates basic diplomatic principles and would seriously undermine interest in future talks by all sides. In the book, John Bolton said Trump was not prepared for his first summit with Kim in Singapore, but expected it to be great theater. He also criticized Moon, saying the whole diplomatic fandango was South Korea's creation, relating more to its unification agenda than serious strategy on Kim's part or ours. He describes Moon's view on one issue as, quote, nonsense and schizophrenic. The presidential Blue House, meanwhile, issued a separate statement saying, quote, it is inappropriate to distort facts with prejudice and bias. Eagle News will be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood.
Welcome back. Don Orozco joins us live from the Silicon Valley Bureau. Don?
Good evening, Alma.
Good evening.
And,
excited to hear your updates from the United States.
Yes. And of course, let's turn the tables around now. It is now nighttime at your place.
Yes.
And it's early morning here in California.
Good to see you back, Don. Yes.
The other day, June 20, the president actually conducted a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since we are dwelling into reports on COVID-19,
Mm-hmm.
let me tell you that a record single-day rise of 143 new cases was also reported in Tulsa County, according to the latest data from the Tulsa Health Department. The cases of the novel coronavirus in Oklahoma continue to climb, with the state reporting a record 478 new infections on June 21, the highest daily cases count since the outbreak began. And that is according to the Johns Hopkins report. So if you will notice, and if you will recall, the rally that was held in Oklahoma was inside an arena, and practically no one was actually wearing a mask, and no one observed social distancing. And that is why it has been recorded that there are a spike in cases now in that same state.
Oh, wow.
The whole picture for the United States, the U.S. remained to be #1 in terms of cases. We have about 2.28 million cases with about 120,000 deaths. But so far, there's a record of 622,000 people who have recovered. And since the clamor in the Philippines, well, some of it is mass testing. You know, in the U.S., testing has gone up to about 27 million. But remember, the Americans have more than 300 million population, so which means they haven't even gotten into at least 15% of the populace. So that's how it is when it comes to testing. So mass testing, and again, Trump was telling everyone that the testing is to slow down the testing, because again, it is just actually hampering the recovery and the reopening of the different states here in the U.S. In California, there are about 178,000 cases with 5,515 deaths. And so far in our state, for the testing, it's about 3.3 million. We are showing you a clip of the San Francisco airport. We would like to inform you that the acting chief of the Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, has said that it is now, he feels, the administration feels that it is now safe to fly. So that is, again, according to the statement made by acting Homeland Security Chief Chad Wolf. Also, he actually, since we're talking about Chad Wolf, let me also mention a little bit, because this concerns about a lot of Filipinos, you know. This is with regards to the DACA program. It is designed for immigrants. DACA, as all we know, has been rejected by the Supreme Court. And the thing is that they find it like, they do not find it lawful, but still the administration is so full that they can actually resubmit the form in order for the U.S. Supreme Court to decide on that and approve DACA, which means completely eliminating entry to the United States.
Oh, wow. You also mentioned about the rally that President Trump had in Oklahoma. How was it? Was it full or was it, were there empty seats? Were there a lot of empty seats during the rally?
There were empty seats. To be honest, I think the president is so disappointed because he was saying there were over 1 billion expected participants. But of course, due to the looting, the rioting, and the rallies, people got scared going there. But then again, it was still a good number of attendance. But again, after that, there is the surge of COVID-19 in the state.
So it may also be because of the rules that has to be implemented, like social distancing and certain number of people allowed inside the place where the rally took place?
No, actually, if we are all familiar with the setup of an arena, the bleacher section is empty.
Oh.
But I do not know if it is really that's the case, just for purposes of control. And let me find out if that is the reason. But then again, you know how it is when President Trump speaks. It's really hype. So everyone is excited. But the good thing is that there was limited untoward incident happened on that day.
All right. That's good news.
Reporting live here in Silicon Valley, this is Don Orozco, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Don. Meanwhile, the Japanese government is urging its citizens to install the country's first coronavirus tracing app. That was launched this week, pledging that the system would not invade users' privacy. Joining us live from Japan is Dennis Liu. Hello, Dennis.
Hello, Alma. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes. Japan's virus contact tracing app, a free smartphone app which alerts users that they may have been in close proximity to someone infected with the coronavirus, has seen 2.7 million downloads in the first 3 days since its launch. Health, Labor and Welfare Minister Katsunobu Kato, the more people use the app, the more effective it becomes. Technology experts say the app needs to be widely used in order to be truly effective, as it requires the accumulation of a certain amount of contact data. The app was launched Friday, the same day when Japan completely lifted an advisory against cross-prefecture travel. Earlier, Yasutoshi Nishimura, the minister in charge of the government's coronavirus response, said, "This is an important tool to protect your lives, so please install it." The software will record encrypted data from users of the smartphone app when they come within a certain distance of each other. When users who have tested positive for the coronavirus register their information voluntarily, other users who have come within a meter of them for at least 15 minutes will be notified. Top government spokesman Yoshihide Suga said the app, developed under Health Ministry supervision, will not record data that could identify individuals such as phone numbers or locations, so one can use it with a sense of safety. Japan has had a relatively small coronavirus outbreak with fewer than 18,000 recorded cases and a total of 935 deaths. A nationwide state of emergency was imposed in April as infection numbers rose, but has since been lifted, although government officials have urged caution. Meanwhile, Tokyo reported 29 new cases of infection on Monday. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Dennis, for your update there in Japan. Thank you, EBC Japan Bureau.
Thank you very much, Alma, reporting live from Tokyo, Japan. This is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
In the United Kingdom, the Education Secretary unveiled a £1 billion school catch-up plan for post-lockdown. Joining us live from the United Kingdom is JL Bautista. Hello, JL. Good evening from Manila. JL, can you hear me? Okay, can you unmute your audio, JL? Can you hear me?
Yes.
There you
Hello?
go. Go
Hello,
ahead.
Alma?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
So as what I was saying, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Friday said English schools would receive £1 billion in funding to help pupils catch up after missing months of classes due to the coronavirus. Let's listen in.
Having opened schools to more pupils and set out our intention for a full return in September, the next part of our recovery will be to roll out our hugely ambitious catch-up plan for all of our children. We must get them back to where they should be and put in place a secure foundation for longer-term reform. Will not allow an entire generation to lose out on their education or accept lower expectations for them. That's why we're launching a £1 billion COVID catch-up plan that will lift outcomes for all pupils, with targeted support for those from disadvantaged backgrounds who are most at risk of falling behind because of this disruption.
Health Minister Matt Hancock said the government had lowered the country's coronavirus alert level after a recommendation by scientific advisors. The move from level 4, where transmission is high or rising, to level 3, where the epidemic is in general circulation, was a big moment for the country. The government is grappling for positive news after facing sustained criticism over a broken pledge to have all primary school children in England return before the summer break. It is also struggling to get all pupils back for the new academic year in September if social distancing rules requiring people to keep 2 meters apart remain in force. The new money includes £650 million for state-run primary and secondary schools to lift educational outcomes and £350 million to help tutor the most disadvantaged students. Head teachers will also be able to decide how to spend the £650 million, but the government said it expects it to be spent on evidence-based interventions, in particular small group tuition. British schools have been closed to most pupils since late March, when the country headed into lockdown as the virus peaked. Some primary school year groups and older students preparing for exams were able to come back to school in England earlier this month. But the government backtracked on the remainder after concern from teaching unions about staff shortages and restrictions on space due to social distancing rules. Johnson is under growing pressure to relax the rules to 1 meter to make it easier for schools and hospitality businesses to restart. Scientists said there had been already a steady and continuing decrease in COVID-19 cases, indicating transmission was no longer considered high or rising exponentially. Hancock said the downgrade in the alert level was a sign the country was getting back on its feet after more than 42,000 deaths from over 300,000 positive cases, but there are regional variations about easing restrictions across the UK. Boris Johnson stated that he is determined to do everything he can to get all children back in school from September, and they will bring forward plans on how this will happen as soon as possible. Education Secretary Gavin Williamson said the government also hopes to allow providers running holiday clubs and activities for children over the summer to open if the science allows. He also added that guidance will be provided to the sector on how to implement the protective measures necessary to open safely and to parents on how to minimize the spread of the virus if they choose to attend. Alma?
Okay, so you mentioned about the tutoring program that would be available. Can you tell me more about this?
Yes, Alma. As mentioned before, the government has announced a $1 billion fund. So of this, head teachers will be able to provide tutoring sessions for small groups, primary and secondary. There will be spent on a national tutoring program aimed at the most disadvantaged pupils. So according to BBC News, plans for the subsidized national tutoring program have been developed with a group of social mobility organizations and academics led by the Charity Education Endowment Fund, or EEF. The tutors themselves will be provided by organizations approved by the National Tutoring Program. Many of them will be students or graduates trained by tutoring groups. Their modeling suggests between 550,000 and 650,000 courses featuring 3 pupils to 1 tutor would run for an hour a week over 15 weeks. According to EFF's Chief Executive, Professor Becky Francis, tutoring is a catch-up approach supported by the strongest evidence. She added the program hoped to reach more than 1 million, calling it a tremendous opportunity to create long-lasting change. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, JL, for your updates there in the United Kingdom. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting from London, United Kingdom. This is JL Bautista. We live in interesting times.
And staying in the United Kingdom, British police said they were treating a stabbing spree in which a lone assailant killed 3 people in a park filled with families and friends in Reading as terrorism. Take a look.
Last night, a murder investigation was launched by Thames Valley police officers, and this has now been declared a terrorism incident. We received a report that a number of people had been stabbed in Forbury Gardens in Reading. Tragically, 3 people have died and others were injured in this attack. Within 5 minutes of the first call, officers had apprehended a man and made an arrest. He remains in police custody at this time, but we don't perceive there to be any further risk in respect to this matter, and we are not looking for anybody else at this time.
The man held on suspicion of stabbing 3 people to death in a British park at the weekend was known to the security services, according to media. The 25-year-old, widely identified as Khairi Saadallah, a Libyan refugee, was held on suspicion of murder on Saturday night, soon after the rampage in Reading, west of London. Thames Valley Police then rearrested him under the Terrorism Act 2000, which allows for detention without charge for up to 14 days. Witnesses to the attack in Forbury Gardens described seeing a lone assailant walking through a park filled with people and then stabbing them at random. British media said Saadallah fled the civil war in Libya and had been released from prison earlier this month after serving time for a series of non-terror offenses. He briefly came to the attention of the domestic intelligence agency M15 or MI5 last year and was said to have planned to travel abroad, reportedly to Syria. But he wasn't deemed to be a substantial risk. His mental health is understood to be a factor for investigating officers. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he is appalled and sickened after the stabbing spree in which a lone assailant killed 3 people in the park filled with families and friends in Reading. Take a look.
Where necessary. If there are changes that need to be made to our legal system to stop such events happening again, we will not hesitate to take that action, as we have before, you will recall, over the automatic early release of terrorist offenders. If there are lessons that we need to learn about how we handle such cases, how we handle the events leading up to such cases, then we will learn those lessons and we will not hesitate to take action where necessary. I'm appalled and sickened that people should lose their lives in this way, and our thoughts are very much with the families and friends of the victims today. I've obviously talked to the Chief Constable of Thames Valley Police, thanked him and his officers for their bravery in tackling the suspect. We now have someone in custody. The police must get on with their job, get to the bottom of exactly what happened, and so it'd be difficult really to comment in detail.
An overwhelming majority of Britain's serious crimes are committed with knives and other stabbing weapons because of very strict gun ownership laws. Prime Minister Johnson's Conservative government promised to toughen up penalties for terror-related crimes after winning a sweeping mandate in a December general election. One person died and 11 more were wounded in a shooting in the U.S. city of Minneapolis, according to police on Sunday. Images streamed live to Facebook showed at least one person lying on the pavement as dozens gathered around, some screaming for medical help. Other footage appeared to show businesses with shattered windows and police cars at the scene. 12 people have suffered gunshot wounds, according to Minneapolis police. They wrote this on Twitter. One adult male died and 11 have no life-threatening wounds. They didn't give the age of the man who died or say whether anyone was arrested. Minneapolis has been a center of anti-racism and police brutality protests that have spread across the U.S. since George Floyd, a black man, died while being restrained by a white officer. Indian Air Force aircraft were seen near Leh, the biggest town in Ladakh, the high-altitude territory where 20 Indian soldiers were killed in a violent face-off on the Chinese border last week. India and China have blamed each other for the high-altitude clash on their contested Himalaya frontier on Monday, which also left Chinese casualties after brutal fights with nail-studded batons, rocks, and rods covered in barbed wire. India and China are accusing each other of violating the consensus to respect the line of actual control that separates both sides in the Galwan Valley, amid mounting calls for a boycott of Chinese products and highly charged public funerals for the dead soldiers. Prime Minister Narendra Modi said the entire country is hurt and angry at the steps taken by China. Major generals from the two armies held new talks Friday in a bid to calm the military face-off in the remote valley and at other spots. The two nuclear-armed neighbors have a checkered history of face-offs and overlapping territorial claims along the more than 3,440 kilometers poorly drawn line of actual control or lack separating the two sides. Border patrols have often bumped into each other, resulting in occasional scuffles, but no bullets have been fired in 4 decades. That's why this latest clash, following months of roiling tension, has taken many by surprise. Single-use plastic waste in Thailand ballooned during the coronavirus lockdown as demand for home food delivery soared. According to activists, take a look.
To 20 box of packet per day, approximately maybe 3 ton per month and 40 ton per year. All people of Thailand send it to me.
And Indonesia's Mount Merapi, one of the world's most active volcanoes, erupted twice on Sunday, sending clouds of gray ash 6,000 meters into the sky, according to the country's geological agency. The two eruptions lasted around 7 minutes, according to the agency, and prompted local authorities to order residents to stay outside a 3-kilometer no-go zone around the rumbling crater near Indonesia's cultural capital, Yogyakarta. The agency did not raise the volcano's alert status after the eruptions, but it did advise commercial planes to be cautious in the area. Local media reported that people in neighboring areas, including Sleman and Klaten, heard strong rumbling sounds this morning. And Mount Merapi's last major eruption in 2010 killed more than 300 people and forced the evacuation of some 280,000 residents from surrounding areas. That was its most powerful eruption since 1930, which killed around 1,300 people, while another explosion in 1994 took about 60 lives. Indonesia has more than 17,000 islands and islets and nearly 130 active volcanoes. The Southeast Asian archipelago nation sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a vast zone of geological instability where the collision of tectonic plates causes frequent quakes and major volcanic activity. Croatia's Borna Koric announced on Monday he has tested positive for coronavirus after playing in an exhibition tournament in Croatia featuring world #1 Novak Djokovic. In a Twitter, he said, "Hi everyone, I wanted to inform you all that I tested positive for COVID-19. The top 50 player posted on Twitter. On Sunday, another player, Grigor Dimitrov, said he had also tested positive after pulling out of the exhibition event. Koric said, "I want to make sure anyone who had been in contact with me during the last few days gets tested. I am really sorry for any harm I might have caused. I'm feeling well and don't have any symptoms. Please stay safe and healthy. Lots of love to all." Koric had beaten Dimitrov in the second leg of the Adria Tour in Zadar on Croatia's Adriatic coast on Saturday. Dimitrov withdrew from the Balkans tournament following that match, complaining of feeling unwell, and then on Sunday announced he had tested positive. Sunday's final between Djokovic and Russia's Andrei Rublev was immediately canceled as a precaution. After more than 3 months of coronavirus-mandated limbo, Hollywood is headed back to the big screen and hoping that Russell Crowe's road rage thriller Unhinged will jumpstart the recovery. The action film, due out July 10, is set to be the first wide release since U.S. theaters shut their doors in mid-March. Christopher Nolan's much-hyped Tenet will also follow soon after. But will the gamble pay off for those quick-moving studios? Take a look.
Finally, we ran a poll of moviegoers, 1,000 moviegoers. This was 6 weeks ago, and we asked them, would you definitely go to the movies if they were open in theaters in July? And 80% of the people said yes, which surprised us. And for all those reasons, we decided to go first.
While top theater chains across the country plan to fire up their projectors in the first half of July, screens in badly hit New York and Los Angeles don't yet have permission to reopen. And even with social distancing and sanitation measures boosted, moviegoers' enthusiasm for piling into dark enclosed auditoriums amid a possible second wave of virus cases may fluctuate. AMC, the world's largest theater chain, caused a stir by initially declining to mandate face masks, saying it did not want to be drawn into a political controversy. It did a U-turn on that policy Friday following an outcry. The dangers of jumping the gun were highlighted in China, where theaters in several provinces optimistically reopened in late March before closing again days later. The capital, Beijing, is now experiencing a new COVID-19 outbreak, prompting the authorities to lock down parts of the city. Jeff Brock, a senior analyst for industry tracker Exhibitor Relations, said, if fresh outbreaks are traced back to screens in the U.S., theaters are going to shut down very quickly and for a very long time thereafter. And everyone from the indie distributors to blockbuster studios will be carefully watching to see how the experiment with new theatrical releases proceeds. Unhinged producer Mark Hill's movie bucked the industry trend, shifting its release date forward from September as the other larger studios gobbled up all the prime opening slots. Deeper into 2020, take a look.
So the movie cost $33 million, and if we earned $30 million or better at the North American box office, we're in a modest profit. Hopefully we'll do better. And one of the things the theater owners said to us is, oh, we like having you go first because the expectations are not crazy and we'll just be ramping up and getting everything back in order. And that seems quite manageable to achieve. And that was part of our proposition too, which is if you're going to have all kinds of risk, don't add onto it a very high bar for success. That's just, yikes, that's scary. And so it's simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. But what's fascinating is Hollywood is not a place where competitors are known for wishing each other well very often. And in this particular circumstance, everybody is hoping we do well.
While the decision to open Unhinged early has generated buzz, its trailer drew 210 million views in a week. Its studio's pockets are less deep than those of its rivals when it comes to marketing, he noted. His movie bucked the industry trend, shifting its release date forward from September. As larger studios gobbled up all the prime opening slots deeper into 2020, Solstice Studios decided the lack of competing new titles and dearth of other distractions such as major sporting events outweigh the danger of flopping early, which in any case is reduced for a mid-budget $33 million movie. And finally in our news, sky watchers along a narrow band from West Africa to the Arabian Peninsula, India and the Far East witnessed a dramatic ring of fire solar eclipse on Sunday. Take a look. So-called annular eclipses occur when the moon passing between Earth and the sun is not quite close enough to our planet to completely obscure sunlight, leaving a thin ring of the solar disk visible. They happen every year on 2 and can only be seen from a narrow pathway across the planet. Now, Sunday's eclipse arrived on the northern hemisphere's longest day of the year, the summer solstice, when the North Pole is tilted most directly towards the sun. It was first visible in northeastern Republic of Congo from 5:56 local time, just a few minutes after sunrise. That was the point of maximum duration, with a blackout lasting 1 minute and 22 seconds. Arching eastward across Africa and Asia, it reached maximum eclipse with a perfect solar halo around the moon over Uttarakhand, India, near the Sino-Indian border at 12:10 in local time. More spectacular but less long-lived, the exact alignment of the Earth, Moon, and Sun was visible for only 38 seconds. In Nairobi, East Africa, observers saw only a partial eclipse as clouds blocked the sky for several seconds. At the exact moment the Moon should have almost hidden the Sun. The annular eclipse is visible from only about 2% of Earth's surface, according to Florent Delefy, an astronomer at the Paris Observatory. He said it's a bit like switching from a 500-watt to a 30-watt light bulb. He added, it's a cold light and you don't see as well. Sri Lanka also closed its planetarium to prevent a gathering of amateur astronomers due to the coronavirus outbreak, but live-streamed the celestial event on Facebook. A small group of about 15 students huddled around a telescope at the University of Colombo to watch the eclipse. Some students used a welding mask to stare at the sun, while others wore glasses made with filters that cut out ultraviolet rays. Coronavirus precautions were also taken in Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, as dozens of students and astronomy enthusiasts gathered on a rooftop. Only a few were allowed at the viewing area at a time, wearing masks and sanitizing their hands as they waited their turn. And before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.